So this morning, I'm going to continue the conversation that at the very least I've been having, and for those of you who have been here on a somewhat regular basis, we've been having about, spiritual development has been the overall theme, and in particular for the last, I suppose almost a year, I've been talking about in the Sankhya tradition, the Yoga Sutras, what are called the yamas, or the restraints, and how those factor in a way of spiritual practice, spiritual development. And so we have talked about ahimsa, so nonviolence. We've talked about truthfulness. We've talked about non-stealing, non-possessiveness, kind of non-distraction from one's true nature. So these are kind of the traditional, you could say in a way, to look at a list of the yamas, that are called the yamas and the niyamas, it might look kind of like reading the Ten Commandments, right? Not to say that this isn't also true of the Ten Commandments. I think it is, if one practiced in that tradition and delved into it and made it a path of self-realization, you would have a different relationship to the Ten Commandments than we're typically given, which even the name, the kind of the Ten Commandments, is telling. Do this. Don't question me, don't question them, do it. It's not called the 10 inquiries, right? But the yamas are really designed for inquiry. They're about developing discriminating awareness, right? So this skill, this capacity for discriminating awareness, which in the traditions is considered to be the one key essential ingredient in self-awareness, liberation, growth beyond the ego, is this discerning awareness. So all practices have at their root this piece of inquiry. Right? They do no good to the service of your liberation if they're just taken as a set of rules, right? A moral code. So although the yamas look like that, right, their real value is finding out, using them as tools of self-inquiry to find out what's going on in you. How do you live in accord or not in accord with this? And even if in accord, why? Like, what is it that keeps you? If you follow the Ten Commandments, what makes you do it? If you do it to be good, right, to be a good student, you want to see that, right? So it's the same with the yamas. We want to see what's behind them. So today what I want to talk about is just the whole underlying principle of this area of inner work, which is essentially renunciation, right? And what is the role and goal of renunciation in spiritual development? Right? And so when it comes to renunciation, I don't know about you guys, but the first thing that comes to my mind, I read far too much of the traditions, so what's in my mind might not be in yours, but to me the first thing that comes to mind is all the talk about sex, right? It's like, you think you're going to become a renunciate, what do you have to do? You have to give up sex, right? And that unfortunately has given the whole topic of renunciation kind of a bad name. Or you have to give up good food, right? Somehow you have to give up the good stuff and kind of suffer in the austerities of images of the monks in their, burlap robes with their begging bowls and just living these really austere lives with, as much suffering. Maybe they're whipping themselves as a way to really make sure they're not having any fun at all, right? So this is kind of this image of renunciation, right? And I don't recommend it. I don't think it's a recipe for success, and it has inherent in it, is the exact same problem of living the other side of that, of having too much, like not having enough for a reason, to get something, is just as delusional as trying to have as much pleasure as you can get for no reason other than to have the pleasure that you can get, right? They're both forms of seeking and ultimately desire. And at the root of renunciation, the practice of renunciation is about undermining the mechanism of desire. Right? So in a way, it doesn't matter what desire is for. The goal is to undermine desire itself, without this idea that there are good desires or bad desires, right? Which might seem really radical. Like how could, desiring, I don't know, say like, well, greed, this desire to just have it all without limit and without care, right? Kind of in violation of all of the yamas, right? How could we say that is the same as, for example, the desire for self-realization? On the surface, it seems like that's an utterly ridiculous thing. But they're premised on the same problem is at the root of them, which is an inherent sense of dissatisfaction. Like there's a problem, and one is trying to solve it. There's a hole and you're trying to fill it. You're trying to fill it with material goods, or you're trying to fill it with God. Either way, they're both speaking of this inherent fundamental sense of lack. There's a problem and I need to solve it. And that's the root problem, right? That is the thing that separates the separate self, the ego, the personality, the individual, right, from their true nature, is that fundamental irritation that there's a problem. Something is missing. There's a lack. And that lack gets turned into, well, two things. I'm lacking. The self itself inherently is lacking something, so we feel deficient. And then kind of outside of the self sense is a sense of lack. In other words, more, it's not about me, but it's about my needs. I'm lacking something and I'm trying to get it. These two things. And this is what the practice around renunciation is trying to lead us to, is to be able to get closer and closer and closer to see this mechanism at play. And once we can see the mechanism, we can kind of drop the practice of renunciation because it's no longer serving us. Right? The practice of renunciation is to just get us in the room with that mechanism of the inherent sense of deficiency. Once we are there, we can kind of get our hands on it in a way, our mental hands, right? We can see it, we can feel it, we can identify it, we can begin to work with it. Then we can actually drop the practice of renunciation itself and, just be in the world in a way that we would just kind of naturally be in the world. But then our work is really about what we need to do to get over this false perception of lacking. So we practice renunciation, and so, what to renounce? Right? Well, you might imagine there's a whole host of things that could go on that list. And in a certain way, it doesn't matter. Right? But I think in the form of when one is engaged to some degree in inner work, that it makes sense to have a bit of a plan around this and not be haphazard and random, but to be intentional and maybe renounce things that kind of fall closer within the sphere of the one who is doing the work, the one in you who is doing the work. Right? So it could be, a really popular one is food, right? To pick on food. But that could be a good one to do just because we can have so much attachment. So you might pick something that you can, intelligently see maybe doesn't serve your well-being, right? Might as well eliminate something of that nature versus eliminate something that is actually really good for you. Although they would both work, it just makes more sense to choose the thing that's probably not serving your well-being and see if you can cut that out. Right? And so it's just that. You would find whatever that is. You would say, I'm not going to do that anymore. You would cut it out. Then the goal there is about being with what that brings up, being with the reactivity that comes from the not having of the whatever it was that you felt like you need to have, right? That's the goal of renunciation. It's to stir the pot, right? It's to get the ego that will stay very calm and kind of placid and unseen and in the background and hard to get a handle on if it's constantly kind of being satisfied. It's just getting enough to kind of stay calm. It's really hard to work on. Want to make it easier to work on, take away some of what's keeping it appeased, right? And it will stir itself up. And then that's what you go to work on. So another one with getting a little closer within the work itself, and we talk about one of the things to renounce is reactivity. Right? Many of us really like our reactivity. Like more than our favorite food, we like to, we like to be righteous, right? And there's that feeling, a special feeling of kind of empowerment that comes from being righteous. And sometimes we say the word righteous, it's a pretty big word. It brings up maybe some big situations. But it's as simple as, traffic is always such a convenient one, right? You're in traffic. I mean, it just happened to me on the way over here this morning, Oddly enough, I ran into Sunday drivers. And what's that? Well, yes. But just coming down France and then coming over to the church here, behind the car that's going 20 miles an hour because eventually he's going to turn into the church parking lot. But not from 2 miles away he wasn't, but apparently he thought at any moment he was going to turn into the church parking lot. So there I am behind. I'm on a timeline, so I think, but not really. I had enough time, I probably could have walked here, but still in my mind, come on, And it ends up, that we do drive about 2 miles, and then finally, right just across the street here, he turns in. We couldn't have done this a little faster. So, I had this opportunity, to really have a moment of righteousness around my reactivity about his bad driving, right? Because it was clearly demonstrable, right? Who could argue with that? So there's a way in which that feels good. I feel empowered. It's flowing. Yeah, I feel vital, right? So one of the things that we renounce in the work is that, right? That moment, to see that arising, to see what was going on. And, sure enough, I was aware as I was driving. Look at me. Look at all the talk that I have going on in my mind. Look what it's doing to my body. My heart rate is up. I'm sure my blood pressure was up. Adrenaline is flowing. I'm tense, Why? I actually have plenty of time. It's sunny, I got lots to look out the windows to enjoy. Driving slower, I could actually appreciate the changes in people's yards, the tulips coming up and the daylilies, right? But there's that part of me that, just the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. Get to it. Come on. What are we doing here? I'm being constrained by this person. So that part of me just couldn't. So just that simple, right? Standing in line, right? Maybe it's at the grocery store. You're standing in line at the grocery store, and you get that person who has the expired coupon, or who grabbed the thing that they thought was on sale, but it's the thing next to the thing that they grabbed that was on sale. But they make the cashier, go to the back and look, and there you are standing there. Yep. So that's the thing that we, in terms of practicing renunciation, is we want to renounce our reactivity. Renounce that wanting to feel superior, righteous, whatever it is that's bringing it up, right? Or hurt. I mean, it can be the other way. We can feel kind of shrinking, guilty, ashamed, less than, wrong, right? And that also is just reactivity. And that one doesn't necessarily bring us so much pleasure, whereas the righteousness can bring us a sense of pleasure, and it's a little easier to kind of go with it and understand why we're going with it. And the thought comes up, this guy says we should try and renounce this, but it feels so good, why would I, right? And the other one, the guilt, shame, smallness, weakness, disempowered, disenfranchised, those feelings, it can be harder in the midst of that to have your mind, because that's one of the things that goes away, is your clarity, your brilliancy, your capacities kind of shrink. You, in a sense, regress down the evolutionary chain when those things happen. So it's even more reason to practice, right? So that there's a habit, so that even when your capacities are leaving you, there's a practice there. There's a structure that supports you to say, oh yeah, this is a reaction, and I'm going to renounce this reaction. You can step away from it. You can watch the reaction. You can learn a lot by just watching your reactivity, right? Yeah.
I just wanted to share
Yeah.
a practice that I have used for those situations, standing in line, is that I switch into a gratitude mindset. Thank you for the lives that allow me to stand here. Thank you. When I just start thinking of all the reasons why, like you're standing in line at the DMV, thank you for having the reason to have an automobile. And that's really helped a lot, because it's made me aware of, like, why am I doing this? I can choose to act one way, and but it is practice. It's not like every single time I get into one of those situations where I get in, start thinking of all the thank you for the hands to be able to grab the screen. It's like endless.
Right.
And then before you know it, you're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so gratitude, a great antidote towards, many of the things that I mentioned, in the sense of feeling slighted or wronged or frustrated. So gratitude is a potent antidote, and can be used to kind of hold you out of the reactivity, so as a way to stabilize. My, kind of general take is, my first encouragement to you would be, use that when mindfulness can't operate, right? Because what will happen in that moment is, if you go to the counter, is you actually miss the gift of being present to your reactivity. And so there's all kinds of self-learning that you don't get to have. So the primary practice is discriminating awareness. If we go right into some form of kind of positive thinking, think positive thoughts to change your state, then you're not practicing the discriminative awareness. And so it's a loss of an opportunity to practice.
It's part of the objective to understand what is it about this that is bothering you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I see what you're saying. Because you kind of like put the Band-Aid on the issue. Yeah, it'll work if you really want to get it going.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's, the hitting your thumb with the hammer thing. If you've got a bag of ice there and you hit your thumb and you just stick your thumb in the ice and then it starts to feel better and you go back to hammering and you keep hitting your thumb with the hammer. It's not that ice is a bad idea, but my suggestion would be figure out why you keep hitting your thumb. Like what's wrong with your hammering skills that you keep hitting your thumb and need the ice, right? So you could stay in the cycle of hammer, thumb, ice forever. Or at some point you could go, I wonder if maybe there's a skill I'm missing here. Right? Which I can actually say, as one of those things that comes to mind, because I still remember, a friend of mine, I was a teenage boy, new on the construction scene, and one of the old-timers coming over and saying, if you hold that hammer like this, you'll have a lot more luck, and teaching me how to hold a hammer and how to use it, instead of tap, 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 just whack, whack, And he was right. My goodness, I became far more successful. But all I needed was some guidance and then the willingness to practice what had been offered me in terms of advice. So the same goes here. So this is my general instruction is to lean into your egoity. Let it teach you. Let it be instructive. Get to know yourself. Don't just distract yourself from it. Again, unless it's what you need, right? So in our hammering analogy, if you actually split your thumb open and you're hemorrhaging, yeah, take care of that. Don't work on your hammering skills in that moment. So same thing. If the reactivity is so big that it's just taking you away, you've lost your mindfulness, then that's a time to practice, again, something like the gratitude or there's a number of practices around that to help regain your stability so that you can be mindful. So, another thing, getting closer within the sphere of again, kind of doing the work and helping to support yourself in doing the work. So we renounce our reactivity. Then the next is, in a way, kind of making life decisions. Right? One has to become really careful around making decisions. And the bigger the decision that you are contemplating, the more you really ought to consider not making it. If it's small, what should I have for lunch? This or that. Okay, go with it. See what happens. Roll the dice. If it's bigger, and I don't know if you feel like sharing, Kevin. Right. So, kind of a major life-changing financial investment, living circumstance, relational, the impact on a significant other. Yeah? So we might say that's a big decision. When engaged in the work in a full-on way, and I know Kevin doesn't mind me. Not really. Right. That's the one I was referring to. Yeah, and I mean, and in part, I say that because I'm familiar with Kevin and his path, and he's very much engaged in doing the work currently in his life. In a very and with an intensity. He's kind of stepped into the kiln, and the pressure is on, and these are the kinds of things that can happen, right? And so as a way not mess up one's life, we suggest that you don't make major life decisions in the midst of doing the work. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a teacher, to have a community, so that you can run it by them first and have it reflected back to you. It's like, oh no, that'd be a really bad idea. Maybe this is just, you're just in a larger bubble of reactivity, and in a week, in a month, you're going to see that, but right now you can't see it, and you feel thoroughly convinced that you are operating on this newfound truth. Like you found your true nature, and true nature wants you to get a divorce, because your partner is all of these things, or is not all of these things, and you need a partner who is all of these things, right? So renouncing your, this tendency to make decisions based on your new insights is really important. Because to do the inner work, you need stability. And if you keep taking kind of the insights and applying them in your life will be terribly unstable for a long, long, long time. And it's not helpful, really. It's not helpful. So those are two of the things that I often talk to people about when they engage, intentionally in doing some type of self-work, is look at your reactivity and look at the decisions you're making, and consider that as an area to do some renunciation in. And then kind of moving away from the self a little bit, from the internal and a little more into the external, is looking at behaviors. So food, what are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your money? So our resources, energy and attention. Right? What are you doing with them? And are you putting them into things that support your inner growth? And if you are, great. And if you aren't, then that's a good thing. Pick something that you can say, okay, I really have the sense, my intuition is telling me that this is really not supporting me. Maybe it's good, maybe you really enjoy it, it's wonderful, you've done it for 20 years, you've been part of a volunteer organization and you do this and it's really great, and there's all of that. And that all might be true, but you might see that it is really not supporting your development. And so you choose to renounce that. So you can bring those resources back in to yourself and your own growth. So I've got a couple of exercises for us to do this morning to explore this topic and kind of see, so that you can get in touch with how is this current in you now, and kind of just touch into the presence of what I've been saying in you. We're going to use two words in the exercises that I want to take a moment and define. So, impeccability and indulgence. Right? So these are two terms within the work that we use in a very specific way. So impeccability is acting with the truth that you know. So acting on the truth that you know, that's being impeccable. Right? So this could be, simple. It's Mother's Day. And I may, I do know that my mom would be hurt if I didn't reach out to her in some way. If I didn't acknowledge her on Mother's Day, she would be hurt. And I know the flip side of that, which is she'd feel really good if I did reach out to her and say Happy Mother's Day and I love you and I miss you. And, So I know that. So impeccability is then doing that. Right? Simple. Indulgence is the flip side of impeccability. It is not going with the truth that you know. So I get up in the morning, it's Mother's Day, I better call my mom. And then somehow throughout the day I'd be like, oh, not yet. Not right now, I'm busy. Oh, later, I'll do it tonight. I'll do it. And then I wake up tomorrow and, oh yeah, I didn't do it, right? That would have not been impeccable, and it would have been indulgent, right? So we use these terms, and so it's important to recognize that impeccability is not perfection, right? It is not some bar or capacity or requirement to enact a truth that you don't know. Nor do you get to kind of reassign an impeccable moment later when you know more truth, right? So, sure, yep. So what I do today that I see as impeccable in the light of what I know, and then next week I might learn something that is more truth than I know today. So I don't reach back in time and accuse myself now of having been indulgent, right? Because this is what your inner critic is going to want to do. It's going to always, your inner critic is always up to date with all that you know, right? But the darn thing of the superego is it knows all that you know, and it knows it better than you do. Right? So it's always there with a so your superego knows all that you know, and it knows it better than you do. You know, you're subject to moments of forgetfulness. Your superego never is. It remembers every single thing that has happened. All of it. Has it ready at hand. You know, we think of it sometimes a superego with a big club, and it's just waiting to whack you with it, right? It was a full bag of chips. And not only that, before that, you had this, that, and another thing, and you had this thought about how you were not, how you were going to stop eating those things and eat well and be good to yourself and all of that. And you had just made a commitment the other day, so it remembers it all. And it can bring it all to bear in any one moment as one really big... Oh, absolutely. Exactly. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. But you've just named the thing that's absolutely vital, which is you have to blow it off your shoulder. Every time you see it, you have to defend against it. Every time. Right? You're setting a boundary. It will violate your space endlessly. You have to set the boundary. So yes. So the reason I spend so much time defining these two words is because this becomes an area where the superego will just kick your butt, right? So if the terms get a little fuzzy in your mind, that's the entry point for the superego. If you start to think of impeccability as perfection, I mean, you know, like you said, the superego's right there already sharpening the knife. You know, it's just like, oh, I gotcha, right? So you want to have in your mind that impeccability is the truth that you know. And indulgence is going against the truth that you know. And there's no retroactive revising, right? On either side. You know? These are terms that are in the moment. Right? So we're going to do some questions that involve these words, impeccability and indulgence. So I want you to have this idea of impeccability again. This is very simple, right? It's just doing the things that I know, right? I know certain foods aren't good for me, right? Maybe I know that I have a little sensitivity to a certain food, and it bothers me, and eating it is going to give me grief for several days, and it'll take me a while to get back on track. But I have it anyways. What's that? Yeah, I love it, or I don't particularly love it. I just, in some moment, I want it, you know? Yeah, like ice cream. You know, I used to really have a love affair with it, but I'm fairly indifferent to it now. But yet moments arise where I'll want to have some. Like I'll be suddenly gripped by this need to have a bowl of ice cream. And I know it's not going to go well. And I'll resist, and then I'll be indulgent, and I'll have it. And sure enough, the truth proves itself out again, and I have grief for several days, and it's never does the experience of having the ice cream outweigh the grief that I have. It just doesn't, it never comes true that I go, yeah, it was worth it.
Can I announce something right now?
Please.
I'm going to announce popcorn.
Ah, yes.
So you guys are my witness.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good. And this is a very good thing about, doing renunciations, and one of the reasons having a sangha is so important is accountability. Right? A group, a community of people that you practice in. So having that, because accountability, right? Now, of course, you don't want is a community of superegos that are going to titch you but I thought you said, and remember that day, and what's wrong with you? Are you weak? Right? So you don't need a whole group of superegos. But better, people that would be willing to help you hold the question when it arises in you. And in the meantime, love you even while you're eating popcorn after having renounced it. Right? But absolutely. Good. So, we're going to do our exercises here. So they're repeating questions. Let's see, we're going to shake it. Oh, looks like, thank you for coming, because you just evened out our numbers. Perfect. Yes. We're going to break into groups of 2. We're going to do a series of 3 repeating questions. And the format is this. The first person, whoever that is, you can flip, arm wrestle, whatever you need to do to come up with who will go first. The first person will ask the question of the other, right? And you ask the question, the person answers you, whether it's one word or a 30-second rant, doesn't matter, right? You say thank you, you ask the question again. They answer, you say thank you, you ask the question again. Then the time's up, you switch. The person who was answering now asks the question. I answer. They say thank you. They ask me the question again. I answer. Very simple, right? You want to keep kind of the social cues to a minimum. You're not trying to engage this person. You're not trying to compel them to move into their social persona, to entertain you, to tell you a story, to be funny, to be insightful. None of that. Because our goal in this is to simply be present. It's an opportunity to give yourself the gift of being present to yourself as you are in the moment, whatever that is. If they ask the question and you don't know, if you don't have an answer, you just say, I don't know. Great. If they ask the question and what's arising in you is, the coffee in Danish you're going to have after this, great. Then say, I'm looking forward to a cup of hazelnut coffee and a cinnamon Danish, and I'm going to sit on the patio down there in the sun, and I'm going to enjoy that. Fantastic, right? So you just answer from what's actually arising in you in the moment. It's such a gift to just simply have the opportunity to be present in the company of a non-judgmental other. Neither of you are looking for any particular answer. You're both trying to be present. Simple like that. And also, in the midst of being present, we're practicing the discriminating awareness. We're practicing that essential skill for our own liberation. So you're practicing the discriminating awareness by looking at your experience and discriminating out a part of your experience that seems to be arising in response to the question that was answered you, was asked of you, and that's it. Right? So we're going to do that, and I'll keep the time. So I'll tell you, start. You'll probably hear the timer go off, switch, question, 3 times. We'll come back. We'll have a little chat. Any questions about that process?
Any questions?
I will give you the questions once you. Yeah. Yep. Once you break into your groups, I'll give you the questions. And if you have something to write down, great. If you don't, just let me know. I'll prompt you, each time we do a new question with the new question, but I'll give you all 3 questions. So go ahead and shuffle into your